In the Gospel of John, Jesus said to his disciples, "No slave is greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. They will do all these things to you on account of my name." And when you put that in the context of your role in society today, it's sort of intimidating and rather frightening. And what I want to do to explain why it should be intimidating and frightening is to share a few news stories with you that have come up in the last week, none of which you've ever heard of, unless you're reading something that comes out of American Life League, because these stories are about death. And we live in a culture of death. I know that you're familiar with that term because you have a most wonderful culture of life curriculum here. But sometimes, to bring it home to people, I like to share current events. What's really happening in the world, and what can you do about it? Well, the first one of those is Planned Parenthood. Does anybody know what Planned Parenthood is? Well, some of you do, okay. It is the nation's largest abortion provider. It receives over $320 million a year from our government. And since the Obama health care plan passed, that amount of money will increase, because under the health care plan that was passed by Congress, abortions are going to increase. They are not going to decrease. You've probably heard that the health care bill, which is now a law, has an exception in it that will not permit taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion. That's false. Abortions will still be paid for, and more of them will be provided because of the cost-cutting measures that go into effect with the health care program. So Planned Parenthood stands to benefit a great deal from the passage of this law, and even more of our tax dollars are going to go to pay this organization to kill more babies and to pollute the bodies of more and more teenagers with contraception. That's not news that will ever be published anywhere, because the media doesn't want the average American to understand what's at stake with this health care bill. Another aspect of the health care bill that hasn't been in the news is the forced cost-cutting measures that result in more abortions, which I just mentioned to you. And what's really shocking about the next story that was in the news last week is a girl in Philadelphia, 17 years of age. She got pregnant out of wedlock. She went home and told her mother what she had done. She didn't know at that time that she was pregnant, and she was later diagnosed as being pregnant. Her mother said to her, "We will work together with you so that you can keep your baby. We don't want you to have an abortion." The social worker at school thought otherwise. And even though you would think it would be against the law, the social worker was able to drive this girl to an abortion clinic under false pretenses, and they killed her baby. And when she was interviewed by the press, because obviously this is a case that will have to go to court, no social worker has the right, the duty, or the obligation to force anybody to do anything against their will. But when the press talked to her, to the girl, and they asked her about this experience, all she was able to say to them, because she was so devastated by what had been done to her against her will, was, "My baby is dead." The sad thing about that story, like the one about Planned Parenthood, is that nobody knows about this. This should have been big news. There should have been headlines about it from one end of the country to the other, and there were none. Have any of you heard of this girl? No, well, she's in your age group. She's 17, she was in high school, minding her own business. But people in charge of that school, the social workers, felt otherwise about what she should and should not be doing, and whether or not she was capable of raising a child, even though her mother had already spoken and said she would help care for the baby. I can't imagine, as somebody who's lived in the United States my entire life, and I'm 66, that anything like this could ever happen in America. Well, it just happened last week in Philadelphia. Another thing happened in Philadelphia, a terrible place, I'm glad you don't live there, last week, that was even to me more shocking. There's an abortion doctor who's been working in Philadelphia for 20 years. The health department, over the course of the last 20 years, has investigated his abortion mill many, many times because of unsanitary conditions. There were things going on in the abortion mill that shouldn't have been going on. Now, you have to understand one thing about abortion, in case you aren't aware of this. According to the laws of this country, the act of abortion is legal. There's absolutely nothing in our law that says you cannot kill a baby, nothing. But there are restrictions placed on the people who do this killing, and one of them is to provide their patients with sanitary conditions. Those kind of conditions had not been provided to the patients in this clinic for 20 years. And people kept coming in and investigating, writing up the clinic, but then doing nothing to clean up the situation and not reprimanding the doctor. Finally, last week, his medical license was suspended, and the building in which he had killed all these children was closed down. Why did it finally come to that? Not because some kind of a conscience developed among the people of Philadelphia, but because one of the girls who had had an abortion died. And it was the death that finally caused the state of Pennsylvania to shut down this awful, filthy place and take this man's abortion, a medical license, away. Again, I find that terribly hard to believe. And I believe that this story should have been on the front page of every single newspaper in the country, don't you? Did you hear about this guy? Did you know that a safe and legal abortion killed a woman? And by the way, women die from abortions every day. But this one came to the attention of the authorities with accurate information. Most of the time, while I'm on the subject, when someone dies from an abortion, their death certificate will not even mention the fact that they had an abortion. So to be able to stand here and tell you that I'm aware of so many numbers of expectant mothers who have died because their babies were killed, I cannot give you that information, because there is no requirement that the exact cause of death, when it involves an abortion, need be stated on the death certificate. Did you know that? Here we are living in a country where, for all of you, your teacher can't even give you an aspirin without your mother's permission. But they don't report accurately when someone dies from an abortion. They will claim that something else caused the death of the patient, not the abortion. And that's happening in America. That is not news. Not only that, but the worst thing I learned last week was a brand new study that came out that told about the profit that is being made by people who run abortion clinics and who kill these babies. It came to my attention because of the work of a researcher who issued her study with press releases all over the world. And I'll bet you didn't know that there is more money to be made today through the practice of abortion by selling the body parts of the dead babies than ever before in the history of the practice of abortion. It's true. There are fetal tissue labs in this country that are constantly present at abortion clinics to take away the bodies of these children and harvest their bodies for various parts that can be used for other purposes. The pharmaceutical industries are interested in these bodies, and so are those who are interested in research and development of treatments for diseases. Now, supposedly, you're not supposed to be able to do that in America. You're not supposed to be able to sell the bodies or the body parts of aborted children, or anybody who's died for that matter. But there's a clandestine operation ongoing in the United States that was exposed in this girl's study. Excuse me, she wasn't a girl, she was a woman, a medical researcher who spent many years digging into this. What she said was that there's a black market for these body parts and these cells of these babies, and even though it's against the law, anybody who's aware of it can go through the black market and get as much as they want. So not only is the abortionist making money from the woman whose baby he is killing, but he's also making money by providing products, the parts of the baby, to companies that are willing to buy them. And then those companies, in turn, can use them and make money themselves. So the amount of money that is being made in the abortion industry in this country is astronomical. but nobody's talking about it. When her study came out, the only reason I heard about it is because I happened to be on the Pope's Pontifical Academy for Life, and all of us got word of this study and a copy of this study. But it just seems to me that everybody in the United States should become aware of this, and that we should be talking about it, we should be debating this, and we should be asking the question, why does the law permit this to occur if in fact it is against the law? If it was any other procedure other than abortion, this would not be permitted for 5 minutes. But because these babies have no rights and because they're not recognized under the law as persons, it is possible for legitimate businesses to get away with this. And nobody's supposed to know, and nobody's supposed to think that there's anything wrong with it. The final thing that caught my eye came from Operation Rescue, which is another pro-life organization that operates all over the country. And it was something that I don't know how many, you all use the internet, obviously, but I don't know how many of you actually are aware that you can order things off the internet. And maybe you all are all aware, I don't know. I'm a grandmother, and it was news to me the first time I ever got the experience of ordering something. But I didn't know until this week that you can order abortion pills off the internet. And there is no medical examination. There is no anything, no medical history taken in advance. But in Iowa, the Planned Parenthood organization, in conjunction with a pharmaceutical company, is permitting people to order the RU-486 abortion pill over the internet. Fortunately, when this group found out about this, Operation Rescue, they immediately, through their lawyers, filed a lawsuit. And now, today, you can no longer get those pills off the internet because an ongoing investigation is being conducted. But who knew about this? Who would have found out about this if some woman working on the inside of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Iowa had not told a pro-lifer about it? And even today, I haven't seen any headlines about this anywhere. And to me, that would be shocking information, to know that this dangerous chemical was available through the internet to people of any age. I mean, you could be 13 and order this thing, and nobody'd know. Nobody'd know how old you were because they can't ask those kinds of questions. You have a right to privacy. Yes, sir?
I assume the DEA doesn't care, even though it's in their ballpark.
You're exactly correct. The Drug Enforcement Agency has never, to my knowledge, investigated anybody except us. If you're a pro-lifer and you are found guilty of a crime under any number of laws, you can be investigated by every agency of the federal government, and it can be ongoing. Right now, American Life League is in the 5th year being investigated by the Internal Revenue Service for an audit of something that happened 5 years ago that is totally legitimate. So it depends on which side you're on. If you're on the culture of death side, chances are you won't be investigated by anybody unless some courageous pro-lifer, which was the case in Iowa, actually goes to the authorities with a lawyer and files a lawsuit. That doesn't happen often enough, but at least it's happening every once in a while. Why is each of these news stories important to you? Well, the main reason that it's important to you is because you live in a culture where aborting a baby has become a habit. It isn't any longer even discussed in many areas of our culture because there aren't that many Christians out on the front lines talking about the reasons why abortion is murder, abortion takes the life of a human being, and abortion is literally a crime against God. Only we Christians are going to talk about that. And the other thing that's going on in society is that most of the people in society no longer even believe that God exists, let alone that he has anything to do with my rights and my ability to live and to conduct my life in the right way. I can't tell you how many times I've talked about abortion in the context of my faith and been ridiculed, laughed at, and otherwise, it's a joke to people. That is why it is so important for you to understand what's at stake if you don't stand up and defend your faith in public. And as you go off to college, you graduate, and you go on to the next phase of your life, just never think that it's okay to put your faith in your pocket, because it's not. Not in the situation that we live in the culture today. If we ever want to affect the culture of death, it'll be because we stood up for Christ, and we took all of the assaults that will come your way, because you do stand up for Christ in a public way. But if you don't, then the question becomes, who will? You know as well as I do at your age that you can deceive yourself about almost anything. You can convince yourself that anything you want to do is okay. And that's literally what's happened with abortion in America. And because the law protects it, and because the law defines a woman's right to privacy as more important than that baby's right to life, which according to the law does not exist, this goes on all the time. And we're the only people who can point that out with credibility and help people to understand why what they're doing is wrong, why what they're thinking is offensive to this baby, and why, in fact, they are carrying a baby in the first place. I'll tell you a story of something that happened to me about 10 years ago. I was giving a speech in a public place. I was in a hotel, and I was giving an address to a group of Catholic men and women in business. And during the course of my talk, I said that if women who were expecting babies were immediately referred to as mothers, expectant mothers, and their babies were identified for them as individual human beings who are not like a cancerous growth in their womb, the expectant mother, by the very virtue of the fact that you were affirming her motherhood, would not have an abortion, because she'd have to think about who she really is. She, in fact, is a mother, not a woman with a problem. Well, after the talk and after everybody was leaving and the waitresses and waiters were cleaning the tables, a lady walked up to me, a little bit older than my oldest daughter, who's 37, or my youngest daughter, who's 37, and she said to me, "I wish I had known you 20 years ago." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I never realized until after my abortion that what I had done was killed my baby. And I have never forgiven myself." And then she started to cry, and I was crying, and it was one of those moments in my life. But the point is, taking the time to help somebody understand that she is a mother and that you will do anything to help her and her baby can sometimes be the only thing you have to say to save a life. But if you say nothing at all, the baby will die because you didn't want to get involved, or because you didn't want to say anything to offend anybody, or whatever it is. I don't know. Everybody gets into different situations. But the point is, it's much easier to save a life than to try to help somebody recover from having realized they killed somebody. Now I'm going to read you again what Christ said to his disciples. And I'm going to read you the whole thing. "If the world hates you, realize that it hated me first. If you belong to the world would love its own. But because you do not belong to the world, and I have chosen you out of the world hates you." What a wonderful challenge that is for each and every one of us, not just you, but me too, every day, to try to remember that and to try to understand that nobody is going to approach you, attack you, arrest you, and crucify you. That already happened to the one who has called you and me to be his disciple. But part of being a disciple of Christ is suffering. Suffering from jeers, suffering from ridicule, suffering from people who laugh at you, but knowing in your heart that you possess the truth and that you are trying not to live up to what the world expects of you, but to live up to what God expects of you. He died for you. He died for me. He died for each and every one of us. And the next time somebody says something that you know is incorrect about the value and dignity of the human being, don't react right away or get angry or say nothing, but rather think to yourself, if Christ were standing next to me, what would I say to this person? Because he is standing next to you. And he will always be there, no matter what kind of a difficult situation you get in. And in the culture that we live in today, for each and every one of you, I would only say one thing. If you shut up and keep quiet about your faith, this is going to get worse. If you proclaim your faith in the public square, I believe we will end the killing of babies. Thank you.